full view,
okay.
and can you see it clearly? It's okay. That's
It's
fine.
okay.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we'll be discussing briefly within the time allotted to us how sustainable urban planning has evolved, how that cities across the world had kind of honed their narrative, how that some of the contests that befell Africa or Nigeria is also our own undoing. So, of course, as I said, I'm going to bring perspective from not just that I've read a bit about it in previous time. I'll also be bringing perspective from a practitioner and also perhaps as an educator. I remember one of the things that always fascinates me while I was in the school of architecture was when they started discussing some theories. One of the highlights for me was Ernest Borges theory, where he was discussing about concentric, I think it was concentric zone model. He was saying that city grow outward in rings. There are CBDs at the core. There are transition zones. There are working class residential zone. There are better residential zone. There are commuter zones. I think also talk about process of invasion, succession, then influence by industrialization, social and economic aggregation. I mean, all those factors were considered within those models and some other ones that I'm sure some of us here even would know better than I do know. Of course, as those theories came to bear, I got fascinated. I want to know more. I want to see more. What every attempt to compare what they are or what is being discussed at that high level of intellectualism, I find it difficult to kind of relate it with our own realities. I'd also observed at some level of discussing every form of built environment sciences that one of the things that befell us is because we don't also own a narrative. For instance, again, growing up, I stayed in the village a bit, and I remembered very well. My grandma had no fan. I'm sure my early childhood, first few years, was in the village. My grandma had she had no AC, no fan, but somehow our earth-made building were very cool. I remember the back of the door in my house then, of course, as a young boy, I remember that you can get cold water, just get that cup. Don't look at the pot as the big earth pot, just dig your cup, you get cold water. So it never occurred to me until I started reading literatures, I discovered that except in research books and some other writings, we rarely discuss how some of these things influence us. Okay, so again today, while we look at urbanization as the case, as a global menace, the way it evolves, the way government manages them across board, and the way people migrate into city centers. Again, while this one of the theories I mentioned was being discussed, he was looking at it from the perspective of government develop the central, things grow in concentric format, there are CBDs, but in a situation where government don't provide both guideline and resources and even framework for this evolution within the urban cities and urban centers, what then happened to us? So in the case of Africa, where developers are battling with gaps and also leveraging and advancing and making profit from the gap in housing, gap in documentation, gap in framework, what then happened? Where government is not even a player. I'm sure for some of us that knew about some old housing scheme, we knew that the one that, of course, I don't want to mention them over this call. Some of them are sensitive. So I knew that things are happening. People are moving to town. Transportation is being challenged. Environmental resources is being stretched. Now, COVID had happened again. People are now saying, I can work remotely. Employees are discussing with employers that, guys, I need 2 days off in the weekends, I'll resign. So that means all the theories that we might have learned is just to give us a perspective of what should be operational ideally. It might not be again in our day. So within this rapid infrastructure decadence and lack of proper upgrading, things changing rapidly that even beyond government scope. I remember having to do approval at the time. We sent documents for approval, and we had a feedback that the area we wanted to get approval on hasn't been gazetted. So I mean, we got there before the government. So we now have to either get approval and hope that when they gazette it, it will be at our advantage. Or else, if they gazette it for recreation and we have put a residence there, then they come and demolish. So things are happening so fast that it defies what has been documented. So this conversation around planning is just to look at a pathway to create cities that have environmental responsibility, social inclusiveness, and economic viability. Again, while some of us were growing up, housing were provided as an economic tool to provide shelter for the family, but nowadays it's being treated like a commodity, as if you are bitcoining your real estate. So you're trying to market someone for what you are doing, and someone is asking, "What's my ROI?" And you're wondering that is it not to have shelter your head? No, shelter should be at a cost. So there is a lot of involving conversation around planning, which is macro and also micro. We look at it from the government practice end and also from us here. Now, why do you actually need to lead this conversation? The fact that at the level we stand as the bridge. In fact, some of us over this call, I know, beyond our lines and beyond our conceptual development, we are now also offering additional financial modules, ROI modules for developers. We're also looking at, of course, in those days, planning an estate that is maybe more than some number of housing is being done by urban planners, but now it's being done by architects. Of course, we're trying our best, but I think it's high time we start looking at consequences and start looking at possibilities. So sustainable urban design focuses on designing cities that also utilizes resource efficiently. Of course, why we support Earth and also long-term economic plan. And again, one of the things that we also need to start discovering, I usually like reading some reports, and I read one sometimes ago that said Africa or Nigerians are like youngest population across the globe. We give birth more and we have younger people. But again, nobody ever asks questions around what's our death rates and what's the quality of our living versus what's the quality of our healthcare. So when you look at quality of our living, quality of our healthcare, you know that the narrative of we have younger age is just because we have high death rates. And some of this, again, I read some papers some time ago, and one of the things that the writer was saying that proven research said that about 80% of disease, the cancerous ones, are here born, either in our indoor spaces or in our urban spaces. So that means if from perspective of designers, advisors, sponsors here and there, we are kind of conscious about quality of life, quality of living, our lifespan. I mean, having good old age. Some of us here, our grandfathers, our fathers, maybe they're gone. So, and it is not necessarily that they are meant to be, maybe because of planning system, our housing provision. So, I mean, we need to start integrating not just economic benefits, but health benefits into our design, so that, of course, beside the urban spaces being functional, they also need to be healthy and they also need to be resilient over time. So sustainable urban planning basically had few contexts, of course, management principle, socio-economical, and ecological, according to theory. Again, management principle often is being said to include government responsibility, environmental policies, and long-term strategic vision. When a system like that we run in Nigeria, it's also kind of not 100% correct to say, hey, management principles should only be on the table of the government. That's why NIA is picking it up to say, you know what, guys, let's be together, let's educate ourselves, let's add value to the environment that birthed us, that raised us, that's also preserving us. Let's also try and add value to our people, so that ultimately the interchange of function at this management principle side, we exceed or move or has moved from government then to us. Because even at the government level, who are the government in that context? Often it's not the political class, it's some of us that sit to advise, to support, and to deploy. So even if we're able to do everything we ought to do, we are the ones sitting at that management principle, often and especially architects and designers. The rules are changing. Architects are being challenged from being the leader of the industry, of course, for several other reasons, experience, values, and other things. But with even what we're bringing on the table now, nowadays, we are not mindful of that again in that sense. We just want to be where we can strategically add value to our project. So again, one of the categories that we also look at globally and also locally, socioeconomic category, which include technology, standard, regulation, market connectivities, and public participation. Of course, this also poses a lot of challenge in terms of market connectedness. Of course, how value chain of products and raw materials connect. So in a system like that we run, where standards are either ghosted or lip serviced, and where we also have less manufacturing possibility, that means there's a lot of ingenuity and professionalism that now needs to come to play. Because again, while we can claim that certain markets are not available to us to either make decision with, there are new and emerging and evolving one day by day. So we need to know what is happening in the market. Then ecology principle also, just basically to integrate activities, to also use minimum resources, renewable and sex. So again, all of these also are kind of knowledge-based. One of the challenges of our days, I remember while my secondary school economics, the factor of production was capital, labor, land, and entrepreneurship. But you see, at that time, I remember the economics teacher telling us capital is the most important part. But I think with what is happening now, knowledge or labor is the most important part. So we had moved from capital economy to labor economy, because labor economy had now become the impetus or the fascinator that brings in the capital, that makes your entrepreneurship count, and that also make other factors work. So we need to start looking at knowledge to understand these things. Then again, action strategy, of course, I'm sure all of us here can almost echo that Africa or Nigeria in particular has close to 20,000 deficit. I was reading some statistics and I laughed. I remember reading one sometimes ago where they were discussing in one of the European countries about job deficit. And when I saw the statistics, I laughed, because people that they handed to that data, people that were grudgingly or that were unhappy with their employment, right? And they said Nigeria has maybe less than 20% employment deficit in that data. And I laughed. I said, you know what? If they had some of us then that were happy with our work, or even some of us that have businesses that were not happy with our businesses, maybe 80% Nigerians are without job, right? So again, looking at housing deficit, if they ask some of us, yes, maybe some of us over this call, we are not part of the housing deficit people, but if they ask us to add the pain of the energy that we get dispensed or that we get to pay our estate guys, the cost of spending on solar and other things that we do, I'm sure we have more housing deficit than we have in the books in Nigeria. We have more deficit. So again, informal settlement is happening. And informal settlement is becoming like a tool for political scorecard at some level, because you look at it sometimes, government allowed them, when they stay there and they become prime, of course, not referencing an example, they chase them away. We've seen wetland, we've seen what happened recently around that Yaba side. We've seen it over and over again. We've seen Morocco scheme, how it schemed out, how some people claim they were left to develop an area and then they were removed. Of course, it happens almost everywhere, but in our case, it's becoming something else. And why do we have this informal settlement? The power for every economy is people and numbers, right? And the people at some level, people that power the economy are not necessarily, of course, the top parameter people provide the stimulators, but people that make it work are the people. I mean, some of us here, we have a maid, we have a cook, we have a driver, we have a chef, and we also have a vet doctor for our dogs or something. So if those people had an instance where one of my clients couldn't attend meetings because the driver resigned, or was it the driver or the chef? One of them. So it's becoming more case of, this informal settlement make life bearable for the rich or the middle class economy or the informal people, right? That in that sense, and we're chasing them away. Now, chasing them away from us will not work. If we are not ready to integrate them, that means what do we do to make those informal settlements maybe more formal, maybe more structured, or how do we ensure social scheme and social urban planning is rich onto all? Of course, we also have issue of climate flooding and climate risk. I'll move a bit, just discussing the challenge, which we all know. Poor waste management It's been there day in, day out. And again, I know at the time that government was trying in Lagos State to separate the waste stream, the solid waste, the food waste. But it's still it's still kind of lingering. Policies are catching up on policies. Sometimes we have a call policy somersault. This is not executed. Another one had come. All those things are happening, and then we have failing public infrastructures. So they are limited and they are failing. So let's look at again pillars of sustainable urban planning. Often start from people. People are centered to some of these functional things. I traveled with a friend before whom I knew when he drives in Nigeria. Wouldn't mind or could run on last mile, only for me to see the guy driving elsewhere, and he was behaving as if he's an angel. So that means the same person can behave well if perhaps that system or personality just change. So I think often maybe at the level of, at this kind of conversation, we should be saying that is it the government or is it the people? Of course, government is also an offshoot of the people, but is it the government? Is it government that is everywhere? Is it the government that caused a lot of inconvenience? Is it the government that did this? So we should start talking about public participation, because changes really start as a, of course, framework could help, but it starts from a stream of few persons. So that means if, let's say for instance, NIA as a team or as a community, Lagos starting with saying that these are models of developing acceptable, social, equitable local realities for our spaces. Maybe over the years, it might take a longer year if there are no policy support, but I believe public participation has always been one of the ways that government in some other economies or countries have gotten things done. Then green infrastructure, of course, green infrastructure is not necessarily like, I believe everyone is not one that's painted green. It's more of planning nature-based solution into urban design. For instance, I traveled to a country where the government and the professional designers, architects primarily, agreed to reduce the urban heat island of the city by a certain degree over the next 5 years. And they achieved it because the architects are deliberately putting landscape, are deliberately putting green spaces in open spaces, even in some functional spaces, and some roof spaces, they even introduce roof garden. And deliberately, both the government and the professionals, if when the owners will not even agree, the government will return and say, we are not approving. So the council will say, oh, Mr. Investor, I've told you, these are the things that will be needed to approve this. So over the year, one of the countries in Europe, they reduced their interland effect. So that means we can also start incorporating nature-based solution into our urban design so that we can reduce environmental impact. Then thirdly, again, climate resilience. Of course, again, at some level, I felt some of our resilience features in Nigeria maybe made us lazy, because, unlike some part of the world with our population size, things that happen to us are things that people pray for. Like pray for, I remember watching a documentary that, was it Qatar, was doing cloud seeding to bring rain. And when the rain came, there was flood. And I was laughing that, rain that when we even come in Lagos, we are even scared. So I was laughing and I was saying that, man, Nigeria is blessed. So again, we need to start talking about climate resilience in respect to what we have and how it can get better. So even if you have the best, there's still a level higher from the best you had. Yes, we have things working. Yes, of course, we have some coastal areas, some flood here and there, but generally, compared to our flood, our areas, national area, and the floods that we have ever witnessed, or the coastal issue we have had, I think Nigeria seems to be advantaged. Again, not without its risk. So how do we push public participation? Of course, this is primarily to ensure that there are priorities, there are inclusiveness in the planning process in which stakeholders are being, one of the issues that I've seen in our urban planning, both even at our end and at government end, is the lack of either stakeholder participation or transparency. And I think I had bought into a scheme before. I want to remember that, not name here, where the estates had said this is recreational center. When the land turns to some good hundreds of millions per square meter, the so-called recreation center are turned to recreational houses in that sense. From there, you now move to apartment. I mean, things just began to happen. I kept laughing. Again, while growing up, I knew we have a lot of parks in Lagos now. Some of them, I was researching recently, and I knew that a good number of them are either gone for JVs or I mean, all sorts of things are happening. So because again, there are no transparency at some level. So while we are looking at planning, even both some of us that are government officers here can also get stakeholders involved. You know, it's like you want to do something. The day you announce it in the air that this is what I want to do, you're kind of binded, at least your conscience fiduciarily, and to the people that are other stakeholders. So I believe when we start beyond lip service, when we start involving, you're planning an estate, you have sold land some people, but they don't even know where their land is and what else is in the estate. You can also want to bind your client or bind yourself to say, you know what, let's have a forum. Okay, stakeholders, off-takers in this estate, landowners, I have 100 plots for houses, I have another 30 plots for recreation, I have another 20 plots, I have this for garden, so that you can also bind yourself, because again, like one of the things that I discovered that also help in some of these contests is willingness to leave legacy. You know, greed in people, right? You rarely get to leave. You can only tame it either by yourself or by the systems. So that means if someone is greedy, I remember while we were being trained, they tell us a plot of land is 18 by 36 meter. I've gone to a meeting where someone was looking at me in the face and said a plot is 400 square meters. I said, it's not true. They say a bigger plot is 500 square meters. I said, it's not true now. Is it not? You know, I was confused. The person answered, it's because you read too much UK standard. I said, okay, no best. So things are happening. So we need to kind of get to bind ourselves to build ownership into the urban project, of course, through the stakeholders and even through our own involvement, to also kind of ensure that effective policy is being put in place so that some of the heritage of that estate is preserved. Then again, we also need to encourage, during the case of course of planning, we can also encourage civic responsibility. I mean, the culture, even waste, for instance, often is more or less cultural thing, but let's leave that for now. Look at my time. Then green infrastructure basically discuss how you integrate natural system into urban planning. How do you also enhance quality of life within the urban space? How things that give life and relaxation. There was a city I was reading about that they really planned. There was a particular tree that gives some sort of relaxed breath and make people maybe live healthier. So they were planning that city. So again, as an architect, you are recommending, again, I'll be speaking, of course, I'm speaking a bit into urban planning and into architect at the micro level, because a city or a plot, cumulative plot, make up an urban centers. And also, even if you think I'm designing just one garage, other garages altogether make up that urban city. So allow me to be using those clauses or thoughts interchangeably. So you're planning and you're planting trees and you just say put palm tree. Which of the palm tree? Is it king? Is it queen? Why are you putting this? Is it Persian or is it Qatari? Is it whatever? Because we should also, and thank God, thank God for evolved space, both AI, both knowledge, both internet. There are things we can plan for that is just basically just to think through the right prompt. You get all the details. If you want to have healthy micro space within your development, you can just ask available plants in Lagos, Nigeria, or in Nigeria that allows fresh breath, that allows even good smell, that also maybe keep rodents and keep termites and even keep snakes away. All these things are possible. So we need to start being deliberate in our micro planning that can get into our urban planning. In some countries where they have major urban planning policies to deploy, in that same space, as the urban planner is planning, they're also asking architects what are the things that make life easy for people. We're not just looking at every design must be people-centered. Any design that is just focused on ideas often fail. So that means design content must be people-centered. So each time we sit down in those meeting rooms, in the brainstorming session where we reconcile, where we integrate, where we compare notes, let's be mindful of what is in there for the people, their health, their well-being. I mean, again, there's a recent cry or drive for recreation centers. People want to jog, people want to run, people want to walk their dog, people want to go on bicycle. Yes, I agree. I understand the fact that the areas in Lagos that we get to be called to design are selling for some good dose. I mean, you hear land selling for 2 million naira per square meter, 3 million naira per square meter. You hear someone saying 1 million naira per square meter. I said, for what? So that means it's a lot of costs to birth for the investor to preserve for them also. But however, our engagement is not just for value, for cost, but also for protection of life, which at the level is also a value. So let's also start looking at those things from an informed perspective. Let me make it run a bit. Time is up. I didn't hear that.
No, sorry, go on.
Okay, thank you. So climate resilience also, of course, it also discusses the ability to withstand and to adapt to climate-related challenges like flooding, like heat waves, like sea level rise, like water scarcity, and some other resilience concern. Of course, some of these factors at the level we don't feel them, but they are real. If you had ever traveled to some places where they have to drive kilometers or they have to travel some miles to get water, you know that it's scarce. It's not just about the Lagos way that we have thought everything is available. Then, of course, flooding comes, all of us sees it. But you see, again, I look at driven around some part of Lagos before, after rain, and I discovered that even some of the flooding issue is either urban planning problem or personally inflicted problem. 80% of the time that I've done that, I've stayed on the mainland and on the island, I saw that our drainage spaces have been blocked by PET bottles. Why? Because while some of these plans were ongoing, they were really planning into space a proper waste collection system that is communal. Of course, not the one in your house, communal. How many people have cars? I mean, I remember the days when I started my my journey as an architect in Lagos, and I would join yellow buses. The moment I entered the yellow bus, I would empty all my waste, confession time, all my waste into the yellow bus. And as I'm stepping out of the yellow bus after paying my 10 naira or 15 naira, then I will see the condo also pouring my waste, granite, water, gala. You know, that time you eat gala, you eat Pepsi, that time you now start, man. So again, I wanted to help it, but will I be carrying waste? Will I carry granite peels from Ojota to my office in Surrey or to the meeting in VI? If I get to my office meeting in VI and I start emptying my pocket of granite peels, how will I look? I mean, an architect now, they are still training you. You are trying to start life. So again, that also says a lot to how our urban system had failed us in terms of how things were not considered when some decisions are being made. So we knew there are problems. That's why we're having this call. We are also saying going forward, how much solution can we offer at a micro level and at a macro level. So for climate, we need to look at networks of drainages, design data, and land use policy. Of course, while some of us also design with data or look at building design, it's not just a science. And interestingly, even now, you can also even subject your design to some evaluator online, and they are even often free. Just to put your design, look for free evaluators of design. You put in your design, even your model, your Revit model, or even your 2D lines, you can even set it as PDF. The evaluators will assess it for you and tell you how climate responsive they are. And even there are even some tools now that are even looking specific. When you turn in your design, I know there was a climate, is it a resilience index that is being developed by IFC, that when you plow in your design, it can tell you how resilient. Of course, you also put in your location. You can even put in your geolocation data for that design. It will tell you how resilient the building is and also advise you on what to do. So all these tools are possible and available for us to assess. Just to few case studies. Case study one, Copenhagen, Denmark. Of course, they call it the blue-green city. Is widely recognized as the sustainable urban planning after the cloud burst in 2011. They had damage. they have to adopt. I mean, 2011 looks like something like far, but I remember that time. It wasn't a long year. Of course, it's looking like that's 15 years from now. But days fly, years fly. Now they have one of the. I mean, that particular city had one of the most lovely views. I remember also. I was excited when I heard about a city. Was it Amsterdam? Yes, I went there to see what they're doing differently. Most people were going on bicycle. They have a tram line, they have a bicycle line, they have a jogging line, they have this. They also have, I mean, close by waste being public. A lot of things are just working. Of course, why do we study this idea? Some of us that are living or traveling, we're not necessarily traveling because we always have the money. Yes, we got the visa, but because we felt what is happening there offers an higher quality of life. However, from where we stand, we can also start projecting an higher quality of living for both ourselves and for our children. In that Copenhagen, they start recommending green courtyard, green roof water tanks, rain garden to absorb water and assist to reduce water pressure in the sewer line. All those things are possible. So why not Nigeria? Another case study is Chicago. In fact, Chicago is also one fascinating story. I will think, when I read about Chicago, I will think it's not very correct until I started going integral. I mean, some part of Chicago you can generate from renewable source from your solar installation much more than you need and sell it back to the grid. And they give you, I think, carbon like a renewable energy certificate that you can also turn to a commodity and collect money from. They also have green roof program. They also have a local farming, urban farming solutions. Call them urban. You can farm it on your roof or at your balcony. You can plant your own vegetable either on your roof or on your balcony. So your balcony, you can even have your mango, your tomato growing in your backyard, and some of these seedlings are free. So these are things that, because I mean, farming is also a lot of work in terms of waste and the value chain of farming that causes some at the level some degradation in our urban infrastructure. So if we are also encouraging urban farming, it's also a lot. Some of us have garden or yard. All we just do there is to dump our tires and dump our things, or even keep some of our abandoned building material. No, it can be that your backyard can also be an urban farm that can also contribute to the macro sustainability of the entire city, Lagos or anywhere. Yeah. In Warsaw, of course, the Green Vision it aims to reduce carbon emission by 40% by 2030. And what this does, they've done like a guide for housing communities and building manager. They also have that guide that is statewide or locally adopted and available. They also invest heavily in development of green corridor, urban park, forest area. Of course, I've also seen some cities where they have, those, you just be driving. Within the city, just see one semi looking like jungle, and they will preserve by policy, by human rights. Of course, things are changing, the way it's changing in Nigeria, also in some other parts, but at least at a level, there's some sanity and some protection for these urban parks and some green corridors. Again, we also have some of them introducing smart energy, waste management system that are streamed, not just dump everything at the same place. In fact, I remember one of the case studies that I studied then. There's a program that they organized then in New Jersey, in which if you have a restaurant and you're able to separate your your food waste from your disposable waste, in that sense, your food waste will be collected at a credit, will now be used to offset your other solid waste that is meant to be paid for. So by that alone, so the company was collecting the food waste, kind of preserving it and repackaging it for pigs and for people that have, I think, for pigs more often. And that company was also now picking the other waste to dispose for them for free. So if there are other incentives, and some of these incentives at the level we're not government, it's just more, of course, in most days, government are enablers, but often is entrepreneur driven, and also some social support, either grant or some form of seed capital that people use to run these shows. But again, is it possible in Nigeria? Yes, it's possible. Maybe last case study is a city in Brazil. I haven't been here myself. Of course, they have BRT, which we also have in Lagos and some part of other Nigeria. They also have Green Exchange, where they purchase garbage program from low-income families to give them some other, either help them trash their bags for free, also give them energy at a level. So all this encouragement, I know that first, there was a time I also had in Lagos, I was in a meeting where I knew we were discussing the possibility of saying if you are able to guarantee your building to reduce carbon footprint, to also have some sustainable or green building certification, you can get a floor for free. Of course, for free there meant without penalty. So of course, you still pay for your assessment though, but I don't know if that has been put into law now. I know we're discussing it some 2-3 years ago. So these are the things that are being placed in all of these cities we are studying that make it possible at a macro savings and also at a micro savings. Other recommendation, institutionalized sustainable urban planning policy. Again, you know, I remember reading an article some years back where AIA proposed and compelled their members to sign to a carbon reduction. I think that lasted last year. That was 2018 that they signed it. They were driving to maybe carbon half or something by 2025. All of them signed. So that means we can also have institutionalized sustainable urban policy, planning policy. Like NIA is an institution, we can say, hey, from what we want, from what we are seeing and what we want to see with our children, I think as a body, we can rise up to this occasion and drive a policy. We host programs, we host meetings, we host conferences, we host Akibuild. We can start, we can become so formidable that even government will be asking to help integrate our resolve into the either state or national framework. We can be so powerful and so deliberate to that level. Then again, building standard can also, one of the things that I find very interesting is the fact that a lot of standards that we profess and we design to at almost a lot of level are either British standard adopted or British standard in bare form at structural level and even at some design level. I was asking a question while I was in school of architecture that why should our window or our lintel be 7 feet? Of course, I remember the lecturer answering me, curious mind, that's BS. What's BS? Business standard. The answer would I expect is to say, oh, beside BS, manufactured product available are in modules of 300 mm. So 2.1 might be ideal, or the just available in market are this, because they, some of the standards also kind of coordinate, not just design, also coordinate market manufacturing. So we need to understand why what, and we also need to create our own narrative. Again, as architects, as creatives, who said that if we redefine some of these contexts, we cannot get things going for us. I remember we were used to 300 and 400 mm modules of tiles until we started seeing some Italian that will come at 400, some at 140. All those wood laminate tiles or wood laminate looking tiles, they come at 140, 150. And some of them want ridiculous modules. They are even trying as an architect to not waste your client's money while you're developing your cut sheet or your installation sheet for. So things, that means, yeah, who said we should do it according to what was known? So we need to develop our own sustainable policies that can, of course, reduce waste, make our building more livable, make our urban centers more economical, and also reduce the waste stream in our urban spaces or in our collection centers. Often in most developing or developed economies, it was established that almost 40% of the waste stream is from construction. Yes, in Nigeria, thankfully, Lagos, we have found a way around it. At least either the rubbish you are demolishing, someone is going to fill a land or a road in Ikate or in Ekpe. Somehow we have found a use, but it is not enough. Some are still going through informal recycling process. So that means even if we can even reduce our waste stream on site, we might be able to also help in this conversation, both the sustainable urban and also sustainable housing. Then how do we integrate transport and land use planning? All of this we need to know about. Again, we need to know the one that is available to us. Then data-driven urban management. Data-driven urban management, of course, one of the issues that we also have as designers in Africa in Nigeria, data that either you, while you're sitting, you can prove it wrong, or you cannot even agree with it. So, and data are not, with the AI system, we thought data are imposed. Data are not imposed. Data are created based on available information. So if I'm asking a question, AI that is being integrated into my Google search is not a ghost. It's only just picking from across all internet expression, everything on anybody's server that speaks to my context. So if I'm asking how many people are in Lagos, it's scooping all the uploaded research papers, it's scooping all the comments on Facebook of some persons. Because if you watch some of these prompts or some of these responses, you can check underneath them, you will see links to sources of information. So that means as we are crying that we don't have data, we need to ask ourselves a question, have I supplied my own data? Because the days are gone that data should be a problem. The days are here now that we can supply data, and that data can be used to make decisions. Because the person that needs the data will not tell you I need your data. You just sit down in his decision room and ask how many registered architects are in Lagos. So if NIA had not said we are 4,000, if NIA said we are 400, the guy will think, there are no architects in Lagos, so let me go and pick architects from Egypt or from. I mean, you'll be wondering why some of us thought our training are inferior in that context. You mean some persons that, man, you are saying that if this is what it meant to be trained in this country, I think I'd rather be trained in Nigeria. So that means, again, you can carry so much knowledge and you might be winking in the dark. So data-driven urban management system is more or less collaborative, where everybody supplies part at some level, at another level, so that when the data have been prompted out, we can have informed decisions or informed framework based on data supplied and available. Again, this journey is not just about us alone. Of course, government, private sector, and communities. And of course, on this call, I know we have government representatives, we also have private sector representatives. I know a lot of us are here, entrepreneurs, own spaces. So that means we all need to work together to make this urban resilience version possible. As I close my thoughts, of course, Nigeria is at the critical moment. But while each day I look at the criticality of Nigeria country or Nigeria states. Number one, for instance, I look at it, for instance, now that the Strait of Hormuz has been blocked. If we never had a refinery that someone had preconceived and forcefully deployed and made happen, I do think by now we'll be buying fuel at 3,000. I've lived long enough to know that when there are global disruption, the least considered country are countries that produces less in terms of manufacturing, are more countries that produces more per capita person or per capita earning, and countries that also manufactures more. So in this disruption that we have witnessed in the last 2-3 weeks, Nigeria would have suffered a lot. So that means someone had pre-thought, either by thought of an entrepreneur or by thought of liberating his country, he has pre-planned for us. So that means we also, while things look decaying, we can start pre-planning. Because who said to us that 2019 all of us will be at home for, and we are at home, we never knew when we'll be coming out. We cover our nose, we cover our hand, and we cover everything coverable. We come into our house, we'll be isolating in our anteroom until our wives give us clearance and say, you can come in now, my children are safe in your hand. Things happen. So that means if we do not start looking at things from where we are now, future will come, catch up with us with his surprises, with his possibilities, and we are still running to know what is possible. And again, we are in a space where it is no more like an excuse to say, I was trained or I'm trained in Nigeria. We are trained in Nigeria for global markets and for global space. So that means the more you know, the more useful you are in the jackpot possibilities that you are thinking. So who says even if you don't want to jackpot, you can go and take vacation and go and pick up a 2 weeks work, sabbatical work with a company because you have value to add. The value is cross-cultural, is cross-country, but there are values you can add that nobody cares about your skin color or about where you are trained. It's about what you can do. We are seeing this day by day in the tech space where people that are programming as a student in UNILAG or some other private universities are earning millions, even being a student. So things are changing. So we need to start prioritizing environmental stewardship, social equity, long-term resilience in our designs. we need to start looking at design from the resident's perspective, not just greening it, but how resolve is the design against the possible climate things. We also need to read more about sustainability, renewable energy certificates. How do we collateralize our design? How do we protect them? How do we shield our intellectual contribution? How do we even start earning virtually? How do we? A lot of things are still possible, but I believe the days ahead of us will come with a lot of challenges and a lot of profits. And again, we should always remember, we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors or from our parents. We only had borrowed it from our children. With this little point of mine, I hope I'll be able to convince us that the urban space needs to be collectively planned, not to be thought about as a space that belongs to them, but as a space that belongs to us, and we have to do it together. Thank you very much once again to NIA Lagos for having me. Thank you to all friends that on this call, my colleague in the office like this. Thank you for coming to cheer me up. And thank you again to the chairman and the entire executive of NIA Lagos and NIA National and all the chapter chairman. And to my friend again, architect Edafe, love you, brother. I rest my case here. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma. I hope you can hear me. Can I stop sharing?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you very much. Ada, please, can you coordinate the questions and answer session if you are there? Okay. If you have a question for our speaker, please kindly indicate, or you want to add to his comments, you're welcome to also do that if you feel there is an aspect that you want to contribute. I also want to say that for those of us on the call who have not registered their names, please, for Secretariat's information, put your name in the text section.
Okay, thank you very much. Please kindly put your name in the text so you can capture all your full names, and drop your questions in the comments box.
Yeah, and if you want to speak, you can raise up your hand. We'll recognize you. That's still welcome. I can see a hand up. That is Gadiel Abimbola Shuremi. Please unmute and ask your question.
All right, my chairman, thank you so much.
Good afternoon.
Architect, good afternoon. Architect Emmanuel, wonderful presentation. I have to say you have a very innocent voice for someone who probably your qualifications will precede you. Okay, my name is Gadiel Abimbola, and I would say lovely presentation from you, quite soul-stirring when it comes to the possibilities that we could harness with our skills as architects. So two things I would like to know. Number one, how easy will it be to connect with you? Because I think there are some discussions I would love to have with you beyond this forum. And secondly, the ideas you've shared today are quite lofty. I believe you would have also experienced some form of brick walls as you try to, move around and shift that envelope, especially when it comes to implementing some of these ideas in a place like Nigeria. But of course, there's always that possibility. Now, with these lofty ideas, how would you advise us to go by it? what steps can we take immediately? What are the small steps we can start to take? And I'll give this thing you mentioned when you talk about people who travel outside the country and they are able to also find a way to integrate within 2 weeks, exchange knowledge. Are there opportunities like that you have, or what would you advise us to do to push the boundaries? Thank you.
Yes, Architect Emmanuel, do you want to take the questions, or we take all the questions together and then you respond? Architect Emmanuel Falude, can you hear me?
I think she's trying to join back in.
Okay.
Opt out.
Okay.
See.
I think we have some questions in the chat section.
Yes.
Okay, so distinguished colleagues, let's just give us a few seconds to grab our speaker back.
Sorry, I'm back on the call.
Okay.
I think it was my network.
Okay.
So sorry about that.
Welcome. There was a question earlier. I don't know if you can repeat your question for the speaker if you are still on the call.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I'm still on the
Yes,
call.
Mr.
Architect
Architect.
Emmanuel, while
sir.
you were off the call, and first appreciated you for wonderful presentation and jokingly mentioned your voice as being innocent. But
Yes.
I said, what would be the easiest way to connect with you? Because I have some discussions I would love to have with you beyond this forum. That's one. Maybe there's a way to send your number over to the institute or something. And then secondly, the question was that you give an idea of someone traveling out of the country for 2 weeks, being able to have some influence on a kind of exchange. And that to me sounded like one of the few steps we could take. And I wanted to know if you have ideas of what we can do as architects to move forward with these ideas, which I said could look lofty, because of some, barriers and limitations we have around us, but not undoable. And that I was asking for your advice. What would you advise us to do as little steps moving forward to break these boundaries, break down these barriers, and use our skills as architects to further this kind of discourse? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I hope I'm audible. I'm thankful that the internet allowed me to finish before they took me offline, but I'm here. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, we can. We can. Please
okay, very
go
well.
ahead.
Okay, so one of the things that happen again and again, at some level, it's good to have knowledge, but it's better to have documents that speak to the knowledge you have. For instance, by the things I do, except I do not necessarily want to work. Most time I have to travel for 2-3 weeks. I always get a short job. So that's why I knew that's possible. So for instance, an architect that knows BIM, that has lead edge and all those BREEAM and all those certifications, yes, PMP could have some level, but because those are global knowledge, right? That you also know about BRI or Building Resilience Indexes. I mean, just a few things that are global in training and in certification. My brother, anywhere you appear, if you are very serious about it, you get people that can say, can you do 2 weeks engagement? In fact, some wouldn't mind to even engage you to come see how to kind of lay out what you are doing in your own local space and what happened within the company that is I designed for global space. We need an input that is African in perspective and also global in presence or in certification. So what I would advise, as I said, knowledge is portable. Knowledge is the currency of the day. If you are serious about it and you're willing to deploy yourself and deploy resources, yes, we can even have a side chat. If NIA allows me, you get my email. I'm sure you can't get my email, you can get me on LinkedIn, you can speak about it, but it's very possible. And again, why this is also important is also because as we grow older, we are smarter, and at some level, we could be weaker. So people that are more elderly have their strength often in their mind. So when you are observing as you age and you don't grow in what you carry, I think it's a problem. So that's why I'm saying that architect needs to be challenged. We are not Lagos State architects. We are not Nigeria architects. We are global architects. Not because we are not NIA and NACON registered, but because we also understand what happened in the global space. And we have some sort of either degree or non-degree certifications that give you a global platform of practice. So, sir, if you are ready on the journey, we can have a DM. Of course, I am not saying it's not like it's like saying going to school. If you have first class, you have a job, you get a job. Or if you have a 2-1, if tomorrow is sure, no. But if you had ever thought that knowledge is expensive, then try ignorance. If you had ever thought even if I get it, it doesn't guarantee a future. It doesn't guarantee that I'll be able to play globally. Then you are also shooting yourself. So at least try it on your own part to have what is global in perspective. Then as you now move around, check. I still have some emails from some of HR in UK. They said send your CV. They saw that I'm in Nigeria. They kept asking, will you be willing to work in UK? Will you be willing to relocate? And they are trying to pull me into the design space or whatever space. So I'm sure they were not looking at my OEU degree because that wouldn't have mattered to them. They were looking at other things that can bring as a value on their project and also their company. So I would think architects should be committed to lifelong learning. Architects should be committed to maybe quarterly or annually re-examining yourself, how global you are in your practice and your knowledge, and you can keep pushing the boundary. Again, why it also helps us is some of the projects that we see on the Atlantic, some of them had to, when they couldn't get either local possible cleanup firm or person, they had to outsource and bring someone and they'll test to our face is because you don't have what it takes. And it's not correct. Either we are not visible or at some level, maybe we don't also have what it takes. So, I mean, this conversation is endless. Let's leave it there, sir. Then for my contact, you can easily connect with me more on LinkedIn. For my contact, I can assure you get it from NIA Lagos. I'm one of us.
Thank you very much,
I'm
sir. There's some more questions which I would like to run through. Would you want me to read them all, or and you answer collectively, or would you want to answer as I read them? Which would you prefer?
I can answer as you read them, ma.
Okay, so there's this question. Good afternoon, sir. I appreciate your paper this evening. Very enlightening. I would like to ask if it is not only proper to start this process of awareness and change with policymakers, government. What measure of engagement have you, others with these ideas taken?
Okay, well, let me try and I hope I capture what the question, what question the person is asking. I got a fellowship or an exchange program in 2017, right? I was in the US, and I saw that they have like a micro movement. They have chapters of either their AIA and also their GBCN or USGBC. They were driving things locally without even a recourse to government. At the time, government had to catch up. For instance, Chicago was a city where I studied what they did. There were some AIA injection. There was also USGBC injection. Government now adopted it as a policy. Yes, we can have conversation that what are we also doing? It was when I went to Nigeria that I knew that there was a Green Building Council Nigeria. So at level of Green Building Council Nigeria, director of education there, we are also moving bit by bit. We move the needles, but of course we need a massive and critical mass to move the needles. Because if we are moving the needles, I'm a private owner of a firm. Some of us here, we are PAMSEC, some of us here are directors in some government federal and local. If we don't have your adoption, we don't have your committal, we cannot do so much because we don't focus on social space. We focus on economy and profit. So I would say, yes, this is possible not only with government, but also with private. And the countries that I studied to even come up with saying, you know what, I have to join GBCN, I have to contest to be a director on that platform, is because I've seen what individual NGOs, some movement are done in some European countries and some African countries. And Nigeria will also be a factor in years to come. I hope I answered the question reasonably well.
Yes, thank you. I think a question here that says, actually, there's a comment here. This is to wish our facilitator a happy and blessed birthday, long life and prosperity. I pray in Jesus' name. So happy birthday, sir.
Amen.
Yeah, then there's
Thank you, ma. Thank you.
here. There's a comment here. Amsterdam and Lagos have similar flooding situation. How is Amsterdam able to manage this challenge?
Okay, very good question. Of course, I haven't, the study is not intensive, right? From an observant, from an observing position, one of the things I saw, yes, Amsterdam's, even when I was reading a document, said even the city is almost subsumed, is below sea level. But trust me, people are very responsible and government is also very responsible. I mean, why I started with people is just because the practice, the culture of waste management and also the culture of design, then the government now supports with framework and infrastructure system. For instance, there are places you cannot park. There's also, I remember there was a time I traveled, you know, I was in my hostel that I even rented, and I saw flood alert, flood, you know, and I saw it was on my phone, flash, flood. I opened my window, I saw water, I laughed. Why was I laughing? Number one, when you see that kind of water in Lagos, rain just dey start, you know, you could just be like, reaching before. So it was government also helping to protect people and properties. I mean, when you see evacuation call in Amsterdam about that there to be flooded, so there's information, there's also a lot of technological support. So I would think Amsterdam and Lagos might seems to be on the same pedestal, but the people and the government are not on the same level. And of course, you know, it's not always about what happened to you, but about what you do, or what you had done before, or what you did with what is happening. So I think Amsterdam, maybe I'll also read more. This is a call to read more. They have a responsive planning. They have massive green belt. They also have massive infrastructure. They have tanks. Of course, besides that, the fact they also have some underground train station. They also have some under kind of a vacuum point for their water. So even when it's raining heavily, and for cities that's below sea level, the substations, the train stations are not flooded. So of course, there's also a lot of planning and replanning. Do not forget again that these are old cities where when they were doing them, there were free labors and there were sources from the colonized countries. But in our own case, we don't have some of those advantages. The only advantage we have now is that we are now knowing the implications. So we can start planning from where we are. We don't need to cry over the spilled milk of Amsterdam compared to Lagos. We can also say, from what I'm doing here, how do I start? So that our children will also not stand. Because I believe some of the things they enjoy in cities like London, like Berlin, like Amsterdam, are the things that were done pre-industrialization, world wars, a lot of things 200 years ago. So we can also start planning now so that our grandchildren can look back and say, you know what, our fathers meant well for us, they planned for us. That's my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. I believe those are the questions we've had. Chairman, do you have any comment to make before we close up the seminar?
Yes. I must really deeply thank our speaker and wish him a happy birthday, Architect Emmanuel Falude. It's been a pleasure to have you here and to tap from your deep wealth of knowledge. Thank you for your contribution to the chapter today. I know you're doing this on a day that you should be having time, family time and all that. I'm deeply grateful and we look forward to more engagements with you. We would like to also continue our engagement with you as we prepare for our Lagos Architects Forum happening in May. But I guess we'll discuss that later. But for members here, please, we would like you to also be part of the Lagos Architects Forum. It's happening at the Wole Soyinka Center, which is the former National Theatre. And it's quite spacious. There's enough parking space. There's enough everything for everybody. And I'm sure we'll be having Architect Emmanuel over too. If we fit into the schedule, and there you can have personal contact with him, and you can also relate with him. But we'll discuss the plans for your attendance and see how we'll keep the relationship going. Thank you everyone for being part of this meeting. Have a great day, Architect Emmanuel Falude. We wish you a successful year ahead. And thank you for sharing your birthday with us. We should be the ones. So this one you are giving us now, we won't ask you for jollof rice and soft drinks anymore. We'll let it slide till next year, right?
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And please note, for those that are not part of this, we are live on YouTube. You can go back to YouTube to watch this all over again. In case you missed a part of it, you can go back to YouTube to watch it again and download for your continuous learning as the case may be. Thank you. Ada, over to you.
Yeah, thank you all so much. Yeah, just as the chairman said, all our CPDP videos are available on our YouTube channel. They're on demand, so you could always go back. If you need to review any of our CPDPs, you can go there and look through and get any information you might have missed during the seminar. Thank you all for joining us again. We look forward to having you at our business meeting coming up at the end of the month. Thank you once again, and do have a lovely evening. Take care.
Thank you, Ma.